At 78 years old, Adrian Hale owned more houses than most people will ever step inside. Private jets, islands, skyscrapers with his name carved into the glass. His net worth that morning was $42 billion. But at 5:17 a.m., he was sitting alone in a silent hospital room, staring at a ceiling he didn't recognize. No family, no assistance, no security, just a heart monitor making a slow, steady sound, reminding him that even billionaires run on borrowed time. And here's the question no one ever asked him. What does it mean to win if you have no one left to celebrate with? Because that morning, Adrian Hale wasn't thinking about money. He wasn't thinking about stock prices. He wasn't thinking about power. He was thinking about a birthday he missed 26 years ago. He was thinking about a voicemail from his wife he never returned. He was thinking about his son's face, the day it changed from admiration to disappointment. You see, the world knew Adrian Hale as a financial genius, a man who could predict markets before they moved, a builder of empires, a destroyer of competition. But what the world didn't know was that for the last 3 months of his life in that mansion, he ate dinner alone at a table built for 12. 12 chairs, one plate, one glass, and silence so loud it echoed. Isn't that strange? How can a man control billions of dollars, but not control the distance between himself and his own children? How can someone buy islands, but not buy back a single missed moment? That hospital room cost more per night than most families earn in a year, but it couldn't buy him one warm hand to hold. And here's the part that shocked everyone. By sunrise the next morning, Adrian Hale was gone. No discharge papers, no security escort, no announcement. The richest man in the country had simply disappeared. No money withdrawn, no private jet scheduled, no ransom demand, just a black sedan leaving through iron gates at dawn. So let me ask you something. If you had everything, the houses, the power, the respect, the headlines, but the people you loved slowly stopped calling, would you still call that success? Because Adrian Hale had mastered the art of making money, but he had never learned the art of staying present. And sometimes, the most dangerous poverty in the world isn't financial, it's emotional. This is the story of a man who built an empire so large it could be seen from space, but couldn't see the cracks forming inside his own home. This is the story of a billionaire who vanished without taking a single dollar with him. And what he left behind shocked the world. He didn't want a job. He wanted power. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that shouts. The quiet kind. The kind where people wait for you to speak. The kind where doors open before you knock. But here's what most people don't understand. When you grow up hearing that you are meant to stay small, you don't just chase success. You chase escape. Adrian wasn't dreaming about yachts at 16. He was dreaming about never hearing his father slam another bottle on the table. He was dreaming about his mother sleeping through the night without stitching under a dim lamp. By 17, he was waking up before sunrise to repair electronics in a tiny corner of that hardware store downstairs. He learned quickly. He listened more than he spoke, and he developed something far more dangerous than talent. He developed hunger, the kind that doesn't go away after one meal, the kind that grows the more you feed it. At 19, when he dropped out of university, everyone said he was reckless. His professors called him impatient. His relatives called him foolish. But Adrian didn't drop out because he wasn't smart enough. He dropped out because lectures felt too slow for the fire burning inside him. He couldn't sit in a classroom discussing theories of business when he believed he could build one. He took the little savings he had, borrowed more from people who didn't believe in him, and rented a small garage space on the edge of town. No fancy equipment, no team, just one second-hand computer and a desk with uneven legs. That was his first office. And let me tell you something. The first year was brutal. There were days he skipped meals, nights he slept on the floor because he couldn't afford the electricity bill at home. He pitched his ideas to investors who didn't even let him finish. One man laughed halfway through his presentation and said, "Son, ambition is not a business model, but humiliation can be powerful fuel." Instead of breaking him, it sharpened him. He studied markets at night. He watched how companies failed. He memorized patterns. He noticed something others ignored. Logistics, the invisible system that moves everything, products, money, information. He realized that while people were chasing flashy tech ideas, no one was fixing the backbone of supply chains. So he built software to track and optimize shipping routes for small businesses. Simple idea, complicated execution. For 2 years, nothing happened. No headlines, no profits, just quiet persistence. Then one regional distributor signed on. That contract barely paid the rent, but it worked. Deliveries became faster, costs dropped, word spread, and slowly, quietly, the garage started to feel too small. But here's the part no one talks about. While his company began to grow, his world began to shrink. He stopped visiting home. He avoided his father, not out of hate, out of fear. Fear that if he stayed too long, he might become him. His mother was proud, but she would sometimes say, "Don't forget to rest, Adrian. Money won't hug you back." He would smile and change the subject, because deep down, he believed money could solve everything. Respect, security, freedom. He told himself that once he became successful enough, he would fix it all. He would buy his mother a house. He would prove his father wrong. He would never feel powerless again. By 25, the garage became an office. By 28, the office became a headquarters. Investors who once ignored him were now requesting meetings. And the same man who laughed at him years earlier, he asked for a partnership. Adrian declined, not angrily, calmly, because now he understood something. Power isn't loud, it's patient. But with every new contract, with every expansion into a new city, that quiet hunger inside him didn't fade. It grew, because success didn't feel like safety. It felt like survival. And when survival becomes your identity, you don't know when to stop fighting. You just keep building and building and building until one day you look up and realize you built everything except the life you were supposed to live. But later never came. Because here's the truth about ambition. It doesn't have an off switch. When Adrian's logistics company exploded, it didn't just grow, it dominated. What started as software for small distributors became a global infrastructure system. Ports, airports, rail lines, warehouses. If something moved across borders, Adrian's system probably touched it. Investors called him visionary. Magazines called him disruptive. Competitors called him dangerous. He called it necessary. He expanded aggressively, bought out rivals, entered new markets before others even understood them. And every time someone warned him he was moving too fast, he smiled and said, "If I slow down, someone else wins." But win what? Market share? Reputation? Legacy? Or was he still trying to defeat a sentence spoken in a broken apartment decades ago? By 35, he had more money than he ever imagined. By 40, he had more than he knew what to do with. But instead of slowing down, he accelerated. Because when success becomes your identity, stopping feels like disappearing. He started flying private, not for luxury, for efficiency. He installed screens in his home showing live company metrics, revenue numbers glowing at midnight. He celebrated profits more than birthdays. At first, Elena admired his drive. She believed in him. She stood beside him during the early years when money was tight and doubt was loud. But as the empire grew, conversations shrank. She would sit across from him at dinner, describing Daniel's school play or Mira's art competition. He would nod, smile, then glance at his phone. And slowly something invisible began to crack. Not a dramatic fight, not screaming, just distance, the quiet kind. Daniel once waited by the window for hours holding a trophy from a regional science competition. Adrian had promised to attend, but a last-minute acquisition meeting ran long. When Adrian got home that night, the house was dark. The trophy sat on the kitchen counter. He picked it up, read his son's name, and for a brief second, something inside him shifted. But the next morning, markets opened at 9 a.m., and feelings don't show up on balance sheets, so he buried it. Mira stopped asking, "Will Dad come?" She started saying, "Dad is busy," and children who understand too early grow up too fast. By 42, when he officially crossed into billionaire status, there were interviews, photo shoots, awards. He stood on stages under bright lights while people applauded. But when he returned home after those ceremonies, the applause didn't follow him, just silence. Elena stopped asking him to slow down because she realized something painful. You can't compete with a man's obsession. You can only watch it consume him. By 50, Adrian wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. Governments consulted him. Policies shifted because of his infrastructure. Entire industries depended on his decisions. He could move billions with a single signature, but he couldn't move his son to sit beside him at dinner. Daniel had grown distant, polite, respectful, but guarded. Conversations felt like business briefings, short, controlled, safe. Mira left for university and rarely called. Not out of hate, out of habit. They had learned to live without him, and that's the part that hurt the most. Not anger, not rebellion, absence. He told himself this was the price of greatness. Sacrifice now, peace later. But here's the trap no one warns you about. When you postpone peace long enough, it stops waiting for you. By 60, Adrian had everything he once thought defined success. Global influence, financial security beyond imagination, a name recognized in boardrooms across continents. The boy who refused to stay small had become larger than life. But inside his home, the air felt heavier. Rooms were bigger, voices were fewer. And sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the screens were off, he would sit alone in his study, not checking numbers, not planning expansions, just staring at nothing. Because somewhere deep inside, he began to sense something uncomfortable. He had mastered the art of building systems, but he had never learned how to build presence. And success, no matter how massive, can feel incredibly fragile when there's no one left who truly knows you. That was the rise of Adrian Hale. Impressive, unstoppable, historic, and quietly costly. And then came the peak, the kind of peak most people only see in movies. Adrian's private jet sat on runways in cities most people only read about. New York on Monday, Dubai on Wednesday, Zurich by Friday. He moved across time zones like a man outrunning something. Boardrooms waited for him. Long glass tables, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking skylines. Executives sitting straighter when he walked in. Entire presentations redesigned because Mr. Hale prefers clarity. When he spoke, people took notes. When he paused, people held their breath. Financial networks flashed his face across screens with words like visionary and market architect. Magazines ranked him among the most powerful men alive. Security followed him everywhere. Black SUVs, earpieces, metal detectors before meetings. He couldn't walk into a building unnoticed. He couldn't sit in a restaurant without someone whispering his name. From the outside, it looked untouchable, perfect, unbreakable. But power at that level does something strange to a person. It isolates you, because the higher you climb, the fewer people speak to you honestly, and the more people speak to you carefully. At 62, Adrian began waking up at 3 a.m., not because of emails, not because of markets, because of his heart racing. Not a heart attack, a panic attack. The first one happened in London. He was in a penthouse suite overlooking the city lights, phone on silent, curtains half open. And suddenly his chest tightened. Breathing felt shallow, hands cold. For a moment he thought he was dying. The doctors said it was stress. Normal at your level, they assured him. They prescribed medication, suggested rest. He nodded, took the pills, kept flying. Sleep became harder. His mind wouldn't turn off. Even in silence, it ran simulations, risk calculations, contingency plans, worst-case scenarios. He started keeping sleeping pills in his bedside drawer. At first, just for emergencies. Then, every night. Because without them, his thoughts were louder than the dark. Elena noticed. She didn't confront him. She just watched. There's a particular sadness in watching someone you love succeed publicly while unraveling privately. She stopped asking about his day because his days were too large to fit into conversation. Instead, she would sit across from him in their massive dining room. 12 chairs, crystal glasses, perfect lighting, and between them, distance. One evening she said quietly, "Do you ever feel alone?" He almost laughed. Alone? He was surrounded by people 24 hours a day, assistants, advisors, board members, security teams. But he didn't answer her question, because deep down, he knew exactly what she meant. Daniel had grown into a man by then, strong, smart, independent, but distant. Their conversations felt rehearsed, careful, like two executives negotiating terms, not father and son. Daniel once declined a position in Adrian's company, said he wanted to build something of his own. Adrian respected it, but what he didn't say was this: he didn't know how to connect with a son who didn't need his empire. Mira called less often. When she did, conversations were short, surface level. She had built a life that didn't orbit around his shadow. And somewhere along the way, Adrian realized something painful. He had built a world so massive that the people closest to him had learned to survive without him in it. The headlines kept getting bigger. Hale Enterprises acquires global competitor. Adrian Hale to advise International Trade Summit. Net worth surpasses 40 billion. But inside his home, laughter had become rare. Vacations turned into conference calls by the pool. Anniversaries interrupted by urgent deals. And Elena stopped dressing up for dinners because she knew half his attention would be somewhere else. Then came the night everything almost cracked. Adrian was scheduled to deliver a keynote speech at a global economic forum. Thousands in attendance, millions watching live. He stood backstage in a tailored suit, waiting for his name to be announced. Applause thundered through the hall, but as he stepped toward the stage, his vision blurred. Not dramatically, subtly, like the world dimmed for a second. His heartbeat spiked, breathing tightened. The noise felt distant. For the first time in decades, he felt small. Not financially, physically, human. He walked to the podium anyway, smiled, delivered a flawless speech, spoke about growth, resilience, global expansion. But behind the calm exterior, something fragile had shifted. Because when your body starts whispering what your heart has been ignoring, collapse isn't loud. It builds quietly. And Adrian could feel it now. Not in headlines, not in stock prices, but in the spaces between conversations. In the empty chair at the dinner table. In the silence after a speech. At the absolute peak of his power, when he had everything he once dreamed of, he began to sense something terrifying. He had built an empire strong enough to survive without him, but he wasn't sure his family would. And that realization was the first crack in the glass. Something was about to collapse. Not the company, not the fortune, something far more personal and far more irreversible. For a long time, he just sat there, laptop open, office lights dim, city skyline glowing behind the glass walls of his study. $42 billion in assets, and a single sentence echoing in his head. You may not recognize your own children in 10 to 12 years. That was the part that pierced him. Not the word progressive, not irreversible, but children. Because suddenly time wasn't theoretical anymore. It wasn't a calendar on a wall. It was a countdown. The doctor had explained it calmly. Early stage neurodegenerative disease, slow cognitive decline, memory gaps, confusion, personality shifts, eventually, dependence. Adrian nodded through the explanation like he was reviewing a merger proposal. But inside, something was unraveling. He had spent his entire life mastering control, controlling risk, controlling outcomes, controlling growth. And now, the one system he could never outsource, his own mind, was slipping beyond his authority. He drove home that evening without music. No phone calls, no meetings, just silence. When he walked into the mansion, it felt larger than usual, colder. He walked past the dining room, 12 chairs, still, untouched. He didn't go to his office. He went to the storage room. There were boxes there, old family items, albums, tapes, things assistants had packed away years ago. He opened one, photos spilled out. Daniel at age 8, holding a science fair ribbon. Mira at 10, smiling with missing front teeth. Elena laughing at a beach vacation. He wasn't in most of the pictures. Or if he was on the edge, half present, phone in hand. He moved to the security archive system. Yes, he had kept everything. Every camera angle, every hallway, every event recorded. At the time, it was for protection. Now it became a mirror. He watched footage from years ago. Daniel standing in a school auditorium, scanning the crowd, waiting, looking hopeful, then slowly lowering his head when the event ended. Adrian paused the video, replayed it, paused it again. His jaw tightened. He opened another clip. Mira blowing out birthday candles. Elena clapping. An empty seat at the table, reserved. He leaned back in his chair. For the first time in decades, he wasn't calculating growth projections. He was calculating loss. Moments missed, words unsaid, time unspent. Then he opened the file. Listen when you're ready. Elena's voice filled the room, soft, unhurried, not angry, just honest. Adrian, I know you think you're building safety for us, but what we needed was you. If one day you realize that, don't wait too long. He closed his eyes, because suddenly the diagnosis felt less like a medical condition and more like a deadline. Not to expand, not to acquire, but to repair. He whispered into the empty room, "How much time do I have?" Not for his memory, for redemption. The next morning, something changed. He canceled 3 board meetings, unheard of. He postponed an international summit. Investors were confused, executives unsettled. But Adrian wasn't thinking about them. He requested a private meeting with his legal team. No assistants present, no digital records, just paper and instructions. He reviewed his estate structure, revised beneficiary allocations, established a foundation focused on neurological research and caregiver support. Massive funding, quietly transferred. He didn't announce it, didn't seek recognition. For once, he wasn't building for reputation. He was building for meaning. Then he did something even more unusual. He began writing. By hand. Letters. One for Daniel, one for Mira, one for every year he could remember missing something important. He wrote about fear, about growing up poor, about the sentence that haunted him. We are meant to stay small. He admitted he had spent his life trying to prove that wrong. But in doing so, he had proven something else, that you can become enormous in the world and still be absent at home. Some nights his hands trembled slightly, small signs, subtle, but enough to remind him that time was not infinite. He started visiting the ocean more often, sitting quietly, no phone, no security close by, just waves. He realized something simple. Water doesn't rush to prove itself. It just moves. And for the first time in his life, Adrian felt the weight of slowing down. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. The empire could survive without him now. It was structured that way, built to operate autonomously. Ironically, he had designed it to not need him. But his children, they still might, if he acted soon. The turning point wasn't loud. There was no dramatic press conference, no public confession, just a man in a quiet room, realizing that the one thing he feared most wasn't losing money, it was losing memory, losing the faces of the 2 people he loved most. And that fear was stronger than ambition, stronger than pride, stronger than power. For the first time in his life, Adrian Hale wasn't planning the next expansion. He was planning his exit, not from the world, but from the version of himself that had cost him everything that truly mattered. Deliver these in person. That line confused everyone. Investors expected numbers. Analysts expected strategy. The media expected scandal. But what they got was silence. 3 months before that morning, Adrian had already begun untangling himself from the empire he built. He didn't make dramatic moves. He made precise ones. He restructured voting rights, distributed authority across trusted executives, locked the company into a framework that didn't depend on his signature to survive. He designed his exit the same way he designed his rise, quietly, strategically, irreversibly. Board members were informed in small meetings. No leaks, no drama, just calm statements. It's time. They thought it was temporary, a health break, a sabbatical. They didn't understand that this was permanent. Then came that morning, 5:17 a.m. The gates opened. Security assumed it was an early departure. The driver assumed it was a private appointment. No one assumed it was goodbye. He didn't take luggage, didn't empty safes, didn't move assets. He left everything exactly where it was, as if proving something, as if saying, I was never the money. By noon, news networks were in chaos. Speculation flooded every channel. Kidnapping, corporate espionage, mental breakdown. Stock prices wavered. Governments made quiet inquiries. How does a man that visible disappear? By sunset, his legal team stepped forward. Calm, prepared. They released the sealed video. No dramatic music, no grand backdrop. Just Adrian, wearing a simple sweater, gray hair unstyled, face tired but steady. He looked smaller than the world remembered him, more human. He began speaking slowly. If you are watching this, I am no longer living the life you knew me for. No anger, no regret in his tone, just clarity. I built an empire because I was afraid of being small. He paused there, let it settle. But in chasing significance, I neglected what was sacred. You could hear the shift in his breathing. This is not an act of generosity. It is an act of correction. Then he explained the foundation. 90% of his wealth, transferred irrevocably. $40 billion redirected into neurological research, long-term memory care facilities, free diagnostic programs for families who couldn't afford them, caregiver support stipends so no spouse would have to choose between love and survival, global training centers, early detection labs, community programs, not his name on buildings, just impact. The world froze. Billionaires donate, but not like this. Not this much. Not without fanfare. Markets reacted. Commentators debated. Was it guilt? Was it strategy? Was it legacy management? But then the final clause was read, and that's when the room changed. His children would not inherit control of the empire. They would not inherit the bulk of the fortune. They would inherit boxes, handwritten letters, one for every year he missed, birthdays, graduations, dinners, conversations that never happened, moments that deserved his presence but received his absence. And attached to those letters was one final instruction. Deliver these in person. No courier, no assistant, no lawyer. In person, which meant one thing. He intended to be there, somewhere, waiting. That was the real shock. Not the money, not the foundation. The fact that the most powerful man in the room had finally chosen something money could not amplify. Time, presence, reconnection. For days, reporters camped outside the estate. Helicopters circled. Experts dissected every word of the video. But Adrian Hale did not resurface. His phone was inactive. His jet untouched. His known properties empty. The empire continued operating flawlessly, as if proving his point. He had built something that did not require him. But the world slowly began to understand. This wasn't a disappearance out of fear. It was a departure out of intention. He hadn't run from collapse. He had walked toward something else, toward the only thing he had left to repair. And somewhere, beyond the reach of headlines and boardrooms, a father was preparing to face his children, not as a billionaire, but as a man asking for time. Just the man. For a second, Adrian didn't move, as if he wasn't sure he deserved it, as if his body had forgotten what it felt like to be embraced without agenda. Then slowly, he wrapped his arms around his son, not tightly, carefully, like someone holding something fragile. The ocean moved behind them, steady, unimpressed by wealth, unmoved by headlines, just waves meeting shore, again and again. Daniel stepped back first. He looked at his father's face, not searching for the billionaire, searching for signs, for memory, for presence. "You look different," Daniel said quietly. Adrian gave a small smile. "I stopped running." Inside the house, there was no marble staircase, no staff, no security detail scanning every corner, just wooden floors, simple furniture, a kitchen table by a window that faced the sea, 2 chairs, not 12, 2. Daniel placed the box of letters on the table, edges worn from being opened again and again. "I read every one," he said, "some of them twice." Adrian nodded. He didn't defend himself, didn't explain the meetings, didn't list the sacrifices. He just listened, because for the first time in his life, there was nothing more urgent than this conversation. Daniel pulled out one letter in particular, the one labeled with the year of the science competition. "You remembered," Daniel said. Adrian swallowed. "I watched the footage," he admitted softly. Silence filled the room. Not awkward, not heavy, just honest. "I waited for you that day," Daniel said. "I know. And I told myself you were building something important." Adrian's voice cracked slightly. "I was. I just didn't understand what was more important." The air between them shifted. Years of distance don't disappear in a moment, but sometimes they soften. Daniel looked around the modest house. "You really left all of it?" Adrian nodded. "I kept what I need." "And what's that?" Adrian glanced toward the ocean. "Time I can still remember." That was the real reason he left. Not shame, not pressure, clarity. He had calculated markets his entire life. Now he was calculating something else. How many sunsets he might still recognize. How many conversations he could still fully recall. How many chances remained to be present before memory began to fade at the edges. Daniel sat down. Across from him, no glass table between them, no assistants standing in corners, just father and son, and space. "I was angry for a long time," Daniel admitted. "I know. I didn't want your money. I know. I just wanted you to show up." Adrian nodded slowly. "I'm here now." It wasn't dramatic, no music swelling, no grand apology speech, just truth laid plainly on a wooden table. After a while, Daniel stood up and walked toward the window. The ocean stretched endlessly. "You know," he said, almost smiling, "Mom would have liked this place." Adrian's eyes softened. "I think that's why I chose it." Another silence, but this one felt lighter. And when Daniel turned back around, something had shifted. He didn't see the empire. He didn't see the headlines. He saw a man who finally understood what he almost lost. He walked back toward him, and this time when he hugged his father again, it wasn't cautious. It wasn't hesitant. It was grounding. Because for the first time in decades, Adrian Hale wasn't the billionaire who controlled industries. He wasn't the strategist. He wasn't the legend. He was just a father trying to be present, before presence became a memory. Adrian Hale never returned to the public stage. No interviews, no grand comeback, no final speech. The empire kept running without him. Boardrooms still met. Deals were still signed. His name still stood tall on glass towers. But his chair at the head of the table stayed empty. And this time, that was his choice. The foundation quietly changed lives. Clinics opened. Families found support. Caregivers found relief. But the greatest thing Adrian ever gave was not money. It was time. Time at a small dinner table. Time on a quiet porch by the ocean. Time to listen. Time to remember. The world moved on. New billionaires rose. New headlines replaced his name. But in a modest house by the sea, life slowed down. He took morning walks. He asked questions. He showed up. Sometimes he forgot little things, but he didn't forget the faces across from him. And in the end, that was enough. The world will remember him as the billionaire who disappeared, but his children will remember him as something far greater, a father who finally came home. Because success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. And the most powerful decision Adrian Hale ever made was choosing presence over power.